Hello friends, it's nice to see you. I want to talk to you today about something that's happening right now, because as we speak, a city of more than 1 million people is set to be demolished to make way for a luxury shopping center. And this is a personal story to me because many years ago I had a corporate job where I would travel to Mumbai, India. I would stay in one of the many luxury hotels there, and after a long day of work, I would go to the rooftop and look out over the glistening skyline. But one night, I decided to look straight down, and what I saw was a patchwork of tin and tarp rooftops, a slum called Dharavi, which is just 1 square mile wide and home to over 1 million people. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but as I looked out over Dharavi, I was looking at a man named Mahesh, a man I would meet many years later and who would leave an impression on me. But more on that later. See, India is the world's fastest growing economy, and as a nation, it's working hard to showcase that growth. But Dharavi is a community built by people who survive by staying invisible, by staying off the books, under the radar, and outside the law. So what happens when these people are forced into the spotlight? This is the story of how the people who keep Mumbai running are the ones who are now being forced out, and how one billionaire is behind it all. Now, I'm really excited for this painting because I mentioned that man Mahesh. This is a photograph of Mahesh, and that's what we're going to paint today. Mahesh is a man who sells flowers on the side of the road that borders Dharavi, and I met him on a walk. This is his full-time job, at least at the time it was. 7 days a week, he's at this stall on the road, making flower garlands and selling them. But most importantly, I'm really excited to finally get to try this really cool trick of using saran wrap or cellophane if you're in the UK. So check this out. I'm going to show you what it looks like. See, if you have wet paint on paper and you lay down saran wrap, the saran wrap will make contact with the paper and push the paint away from the places where it makes contact. And what you get is this really cool, abstract, jagged pattern. A lot of painters use it for mountains or just like abstract, sharp shapes. I'm going to try to use it to mimic the folds and creases in the tarp. I've wanted to do this forever. I've never done it before, so let's see how it goes, but I'm really excited to try it out. The area today known as Dharavi was actually once a fishing community on one of 7 islands on the Arabian Sea. When the British arrived in the 1700s, they drained the water around those islands and they joined them into one single landmass, which is what we now know as Mumbai today. By 1850, as the British grew the city of Bombay, they displaced lower caste groups in the area, especially those who performed work that was deemed undesirable by the British. So this was primarily leather tanners, clothing dyers, essentially messy and stinky jobs were all forced into this area, this swampy area known as Dharavi. So this area quickly transformed into a dense and self-built neighborhood, like an informal city run almost entirely outside of official regulation. In 1947, India gained independence from the British, and when that happened, migrants from all over the country flocked to Bombay in search of opportunity. Dharavi, for its low expenses and low barrier to entry, became their home base. These migrants added new languages, crafts, and microeconomies. And each of these little communities had its own craft. So you would have all of the leather workers in one place and all of the tanners in another place. And this is how Dharavi became essentially a massive, unregulated, and informal economy. So by the 1950s, Bombay, now known as Mumbai, was becoming India's financial and entertainment capital, with Dharavi sitting right in the middle of it all. And suddenly you had this mega city with a patch of prime real estate hiding in plain sight. So where did this plan to bulldoze Dharavi really come from? Well, you could actually say that it started with good intentions for the people of Dharavi, who at this point were living in pretty squalid conditions. See, by the 1970s, the living conditions were what you would expect of a slum. Rampant disease, filthy water, and generally just an atrocious quality of life. So Mumbai's government introduced development plans to formally upgrade and redevelop the land. So the proposal was roughly this. Develop the land that Dharavi sits on, open it up for businesses and apartments, and build a few low-income housing buildings for all of the residents who are already in Dharavi to move into. So for 30 years, different political parties chipped away at this idea, promising to redevelop Dharavi. But efforts continuously fell short to political differences, corruption, and logistical challenges, which I'll get into. This went on for decades until finally, in 2003, the city of Mumbai hired the consulting firm McKinsey to actually come in and make a recommendation for what to do with this unregulated economy that was built on prime real estate. The study showed that Dharavi's informal economy generated between $1 to $2 billion a year. And here's the even crazier part. The study found that almost all of Mumbai's recycling was actually done in Dharavi via people who would go out and about around Mumbai, gather trash, bring it back to Dharavi, and then sort through that trash for recyclable raw materials, which they could then sell to get meager earnings. So this report painted Dharavi as a vibrant and thriving economy. But then, in typical management consultant fashion, they made their final recommendation. Mumbai should demolish Dharavi and all of the homes to those 1 million people, privatize it, and then sell it to developers. So naturally, people were incensed at this report for obvious reasons. It completely disregarded the humanity of Dharavi. It reduced the livelihood of 1 million people into a PowerPoint presentation and a recommendation to make rich people richer. But more than anything, the report ignored the most fundamental truth about Dharavi. In this city within a city, homes and workplaces are one and the same. So over 80% of homes in Dharavi double as workshops. So what that means is that if you walk through the streets of Dharavi, you'll find potters firing clay right beside their beds, leather workers tanning hides beneath their living rooms, or recyclers sorting mountains of plastic and trash in a shed right next to their home. So the idea of rehoming residents into high-rises, like tenement housing, fundamentally destroys the livelihood of those 1 million people who already live there. Now that was 20 years ago, but since then, the question of what to do with Dharavi has remained. But today, Dharavi is facing demolition. So what changed? Well, enter this guy. A billionaire who in 2022 paid the Indian government $1 billion to gain the right to turn Dharavi into a neighborhood that promises billions of dollars in economic return. In Adani's vision, Dharavi becomes a district of high-end retail, modern offices, world-class amenities, and 20th floor apartments instead of ground floor workshops. And of course, he'll build a couple low-income housing towers to help move some of the residents who are there into safe homes. Except that that plan isn't going to work. For one, less than half of Dharavi's current residents qualify for being rehomed under Adani's new plan. His plan states that in order to be rehomed, you have to live on the ground floor, even though most families live in little rooms above their workshops, which are on the ground floor. They also have to prove that they lived in Dharavi before January 2000, which is pretty much impossible considering that Dharavi is unregulated, so it's not like you have housing papers for the most part. But Adani has a plan for those people too. See, he says that ineligible families will be moved to rehabilitation sites miles away on the city's edge. So entire industries that survive because families live next to their workshops will be forced into a distant commercial zone, destroying the unique live-work relationship that has developed over the past 200 years in Dharavi and which makes most people's businesses able to exist in the first place. And for those who do qualify for new housing, the shift from community-built structures to high-rise apartments means that they have no place to put their workshops and their livelihoods. So what the city calls redevelopment, the residents fear is something else entirely: the dismantling of a community so that a wealthier one can take its place. So Adani's plan is listed out on his website under the title A New Chapter of Dignity. And it is a wild read. It's written as a letter from Adani, and it mentions Mike Tyson multiple times, and it reads like an eccentric billionaire's blog post, basically. I think there's no better way to sum all of this up than to read you the closing sentences of his manifesto on his website. God willing, the likes of Slumdog Millionaire's director will discover that the new Dharavi is producing millionaires without the Slumdog prefix. See, cities love to talk about progress, but progress for whom? Does a city like Mumbai really need more millionaires? Maybe instead we should focus on providing the 1 million people in Dharavi with access to clean water, or better education, or better healthcare. The bulldozing of Dharavi has not yet started, but there are plans cemented. There are a few grassroots organizations that are fighting for the citizens of Dharavi, and I will link those down below in case you want to see more. I also have a Patreon where I share all kinds of information about stories that I've talked about. I will share anything I come across that's interesting, and I have a lot of really interesting personal anecdotes from people in Dharavi. So if you're interested in that kind of content and you want to learn more, consider joining my Patreon. It's a great small but growing community, and as always, I donate 100% of your subscription to a charity. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time on Painting the Past.